Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. As she said, my name is Bruce Trammell. I'm a father of 5, but I'm also a brother of 9. I'm the oldest. And what I'm going to do is tell you a story about 2 places that mean something to me, two towns, and one of them is right here in New Haven, but the first one is where I was born. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Hey, I appreciate that. It is a lovely place. And sometimes people will say that, if you haven't really spent a lot of time in a place, that you really don't know it, and you're not really, from that place because you haven't experienced all of it. But the thing is that, we all have our own special experiences. And so my experience in Brooklyn was when I was very young. But it was the start of what would be how I related to my family on both sides. Because in Brooklyn, I was born into, on my mother's side, basically like my grandfather's house. He had a brownstone, and in that brownstone, there was family. But there were also other people, so you got to see these people every day. They were always there, they were always around. So family was something that meant a lot to me, especially being the oldest grandchild. Everyone, kind of dotted on the oldest one, it's like that. So we stayed in that house for a little while, and then we finally branched out and, moved into a place of our own. And in there, I got a chance to go to school. I started off school. And Brooklyn for me was like a magical place because I got to experience being a kid at a time when it was like good to be a kid. It was interesting to be a child at that time. People respected the idea that we were kids and they let us have a little bit of expression, even though, you had to know your place too at the same time. But we lived there, and when I was in Brooklyn, I had bronchitis. And so my father had told me about Connecticut, and he told me that Connecticut had trees, and Connecticut had, had space, because what we had was sidewalks and all to play on, right? He said it had parks, and he said it would be better for my bronchitis. So we were going to move to New Haven, Connecticut. But that wasn't a real reason. That was just the reason he told me, The whole thing was that he moved to New Haven because his family was in New Haven and jobs were in New Haven. So we were basically migrating out of Brooklyn and coming to New Haven to live. So I thought, he was doing this all for me. So I was, very excited about it. We got there and, I saw the trees and there were parks, So to really test this theory that, I wouldn't get as sick, I had to have a bag of Wise potato chips. Because in Brooklyn, I couldn't eat these Wise potato chips without really getting sick. So if I could eat Wise potato chips, right, then I knew that my father made the right choice. So I tested it out, and it worked. I didn't get sick. I said, wow, So in my mind, this was the magic place of all, So I grew to really like New Haven because New Haven held other special moments for me. And one of those moments I'll tell you about is that when I was in about 11 years old, I guess you're in about the 6th grade or so, I think, someone came to my parents and they told them about this program that would catapult me into college, you see? So it was called the Ulysses S. Grant Program. And the idea of the program was that I would get to go to this school, and they had picked it out, it was Kent. was supposed to go to Kent, and then from Kent, I would end up in an Ivy League college, and more than likely, I would go to Yale, so I would come back home. So I was all for this. This was beautiful. So my parents allowed me to do that, and that year that I did it, they only allowed me to do it for a year, but it was great. It was wonderful, because I got to really experience the Yale campus. I got a chance to walk around it and be anywhere I wanted to be, and no one really challenged me. So it was just like, it was my place. So you couldn't tell me that I didn't go to Yale, because access was everything, We ate lunch there in summertime. We did projects, and I learned about photography and a lot of other things. So it was a great thing. But then my parents decided that they didn't want me to go to college. So I didn't go anymore. But I had, the summer and the winter, and it was filled with a lot of memories and a lot of people I had met and a lot of things that I had done. So I enjoyed the experience. It was good for me. What happened next was that they decided that I would end up going to a school like Eli Whitney. It was a technical school, so I could learn a trade. Well, that was good too. That was okay, because I like cars. I like fixing things, My dad had taught me, to fix things around the house. Remember antennas on the outside, on the roof? Yeah, well, I was an antenna, what you could call a repairman or something, We would put up antennas, we would take down antennas, we would move them around, tighten them down. I was good at that, I could climb up on the roof and do that. So I enjoyed working with my hands, those were the things that were kind of important to me, is being able to do something that I could fix, and it worked, because I took that years and years into my life as to fixing not only cars, but I started fixing typewriters and other machinery like that, and it got me places where I never would have gone before, So between these two cities, I also learned a lot of things. Like my uncle took me down to what he would call a corner in Brooklyn to show me how men interacted with each other. But here in Connecticut, on a job, the guys took me out when we finished our shift. We would get off at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they showed me how they interacted here in the park, and they would, sit around and they would talk for a while before they went home and before we went to sleep. So I got to see things that were similar. Connecticut and New York to me weren't really that different when it came to experiences. It was just location. But the people were basically like the same. So it's like, if you saw a person that you met in your life, right, in one place, it's like when you got to another place, you almost met the same person all over again. That personality, and it just kind of weaved in for me. So nothing was ever strange, or people weren't strangers or different. It was just that people acted a certain way, and I learned how to be able to deal with them by experiences with Brooklyn and experiences with Connecticut. So that's what moved me to be the type of person that I became. That's what moved me to understand how my father operated, because my father was strictly a Harlem boy, but he had Virginia roots. And as far as New York was concerned, he was a sports fanatic, and he liked every team in New York. He didn't care what sport it was, It'd be ice hockey or anything. As long as they were a New York team, he was rooting for them, And that was the fabric of him. But then in Connecticut, I never thought that he would really take it up and he would, own up to living here and not being from Harlem, But he did. And I saw the transformation that he had with, moving to Connecticut and accepting Connecticut and understanding that now this was the place where he belonged and he lived. So I learned that from him, and I became the same way that he was. And I accepted the tale of both of my cities. Thank you.